What's going on?
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding. From the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing. So cold, behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts feeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll soon be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll soon be winning. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If you wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Dead Air Live and the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. Is our Sunday night show, always in and around the topics and guests within the paranormal. My name is George Lopez. With me, as always, Mr. Ken DaCosta. And thank you guys for joining us tonight. Sorry about last week. We were kind of being us, doing our own thing. Ken had some previous engagements, and I have enormous renovations that were going on here at the house. And it got down to it, and it's like, look, we just can't get everything coordinated for this evening. So we took that night off. I know you guys were probably all upset there in the chat, but we're back this week. We are back.
Sorry.
Yeah, we had again a lot of work going on. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there today, and I hope you guys had a nice little celebration. And we're back with you guys this evening. Don't forget, as always, to hit that subscribe button. Very important for you guys to do that. The reminder bell for upcoming content, and certainly the thumbs up. It's an important part to tell the algorithm how much you're enjoying our show. So thank you guys again for joining us tonight. Ken, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It was
Yeah.
a nice day. Got to talk to all the kids, some of the grandkids, you know how they are. And yeah, as far as last week, this is a busy time. You know, we are off on investigations and road trips and looking into spooky things. And sometimes the two worlds just collide with each other. So, you know, there are things to do, places to go, but we thank you for your patience. We're going to make it up to you tonight, though. We're
We
going to
are
make it
indeed.
up to you
Uh,
tonight.
when whenever we have this guest come on the show, I have three words that I'll put in chat regularly, which is my brain hurts.
Hmm.
It's fun, it's educational, but it makes you think when it comes to this field. And there's nobody better than our guest tonight. And Ken, if you want to do the introduction.
Absolutely, and we're looking for a lot of fun because he's a fun guy to have on this show. It's been a minute, but our guest tonight is Loyd Auerbach, one of the most respected voices in parapsychology. For more than 40 years, Loyd has investigated hauntings, psychic experiences, and other unexplained phenomena while bringing a thoughtful balance of scientific inquiry and open-minded exploration to the field. Hallelujah. As an author, educator, and researcher, he spent decades examining not only the paranormal itself, but also the fascinating role that human perception, belief, and consciousness play in these experiences. Without further ado, welcome back, Loyd. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's been a while. So,
Yeah.
What have you been up to? Just give us a full synopsis in one sentence or less.
yeah, go ahead.
Teaching, promoting my books and my own podcast, which is every other Sunday night. Not tonight, obviously, called Ask Professor Paranormal.
It's our
Right.
competition.
Yeah.
We're
Answer all sorts of
doomed.
questions. There's an overlap time-wise, but it's not.
Yeah. I mean, you're on the West Coast, so that works. Let me do a little math here. If the math is mathing, then we're cool. We're okay.
Yeah, but mainly it's been working with the Rhine Center. I'm president of the board of the Rhine Research Center and one of the principal instructors for the Education Center. So it's a lot of teaching, a little bit of writing, and then some hobby type stuff, some other stuff. So
you find yourself a lot of the times, though, still getting these invitations for interviews, I would imagine.
I probably do between 3 and 6 podcast interviews beside my own every month. So I get a lot.
It's June 21st, so we've got to be around number 4, George, on that list right now.
You're actually, let's see, this month I think you're number 3 because I was away for a few days. So
Ooh, okay, great.
I was always thought that we were number one in Lloyd's heart, but that's okay.
well, I mean, maybe you are, maybe you aren't.
Well, I know Ken has some explosive questions to start off with. I'll leave him with you, and then I'll be back joining you in a little while.
Okay.
Ken?
All right, thank you. Our guest tonight, Loyd Auerbach. Loyd, as said in the pregame show, I want to come out with something a little bit different, but hopefully everybody bears with me because it all kind of ties together. I want to talk about UFO disclosure tonight.
Okay.
Particularly, most disclosure advocates argue that humanity is ready to learn. We're not alone, yet recent events like a global pandemic seem to more deepen political, ideological, and create more social divisions rather than unite us. So, from a psychological perspective, do you think humanity is truly prepared for the confirmation of a non-human intelligence? Are we there yet? Really?
I think a lot of people actually are. I saw Disclosure Day the other day,
Yeah.
last week, the Spielberg film, which hit a couple of important points. And they did talk about this, is humanity ready for this sort of thing? And there was a religious comment, that I think really fits in because really, when you look anthropologically and societally at whether we're ready for this, I think most people are ready certainly in Western culture and even in other cultures that already believe in this sort of thing. So many people believe in the possibility. I think the question is going to be, what does that disclosure look like?
Mm-hmm.
What is embodied in that disclosure? If it's just confirmation, yes, there are people. I mean, there are researchers been saying it's impossible that there's not extraterrestrial life out there. The question has always been, do they come here?
Right.
And that's still a question. So it's good. I think we're ready, or most people are ready, but I think a lot of people in the religious world are not going to be as ready as, especially fundamentalist religion, not as ready because it's going to kind of hit them a little hard. But again, there's that comment from Mother Superior in Disclosure Day, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody, but it basically cuts through that like so well. And there were a couple other points in Disclosure Day that cut through it as well. And I'll mention my brothers in the movie. So
I didn't know that. I would have. I would have. I'm glad I led with this for that reason. So shout out to your brother. Congratulations. Nice job.
Thank you.
Fundamentalists. Okay. I keep reverting back to the COVID when, it seemed like everybody would work together, but everybody was having their little tug of wars over different things. But you talk about fundamentalists, that leads to my next question. There are already groups, and full disclosure, no pun intended, I think that it is plausible that not all of these things that are flying around are extraterrestrial in nature. Of course, I think there's a lot of technology. Let's call it terrestrial technology. Where
Yeah.
they got it from, that's another show.
I can actually even talk a little bit about that. My late
Go.
colleague and friend and mentor Martin Caden who was a science fiction and science writer. He was an aeronautics, an aviation expert. He was a consultant at NASA as well, and he had dug into this question a lot. And in fact, I'll mention something else that happened while I was with him. He was convinced that a lot of it was actually our technology. And there was some stuff there was even a project that came out, I think it was Project Aurora, that came out in the 90s in Time magazine or something like that, about an ion drive for an aircraft that was causing it to not like become a stealth plane, not be seen very well, but it caused problems for the pilots, which is why they basically, shelved it. I talked to somebody who actually was involved. He told me and he was in with Lockheed years ago, and this was kind of informally. We actually had a rock concert with a mutual friend, and he had worked at Area 51. And when I asked him, just kiddingly, I said, "So, UFOs? Do you guys capture a flying saucer or something like that? Is that what's causing the?" He said, "Well, the guy who's developing some of the aircraft was inspired by the way UFOs are reported to move. So they're trying to duplicate what the reports were, not that they had technology to work from." Which actually, that has happened in human invention over the years. I do know that when I was with Martin Caden, he gets a call from a science fiction writer named G. Harry Stein and puts him on speaker because Harry Stein was at a UFO convention in, I think, Phoenix. And they were two guys from the government, I think it was the NSA, who were kind of hitting him up because he had a couple of recent novels out taking place in the year 2050 where there was an alien invasion, and our government had developed supercarrier submarines that were both aircraft carriers and subs, and they had a lot of detail in this, and they were like hitting him up, and he's on the phone with us, and we can hear these guys telling him to get off the phone in the background. And Marty says to him, and they're asking, "Where'd you get this information? This is all top secret," and so on. And Marty, first of all, said to him, "Did you tell him where you got it from?" He said, "Yeah, I read a lot of stuff." That's where he got it from. And the other thing then, Marty said, "Did you tell him who you really are?" Because G. Harry Stein was actually a retired naval intelligence officer. So I think it was actually naval intelligence that was there. So he just pulled out his ID and they left him alone. It happened to Martin Caden in the 1960s when he wrote a book involving a specific design of a submarine, which he had put together from all the stuff that he had read. And he read all sorts of science stuff, aviation stuff, nautical stuff to write this book. Same thing. Government hits him up, like, "Where'd you get this information?" And it happened to him in the 1940s when he was a kid, writing for Aviation Week magazine, when he published an article speculating on an atomic bomb. And apparently a lot of the details that he had pulled together from science journals were accurate, and he ended up being picked up by the FBI and taken to DC. The upshot was they offered him, they want to know what he wanted, or did he want to go to prison until the end of the war. And he basically said, he was 17, he said, "Well, put me in the Army Air Corps. I'm not old enough, but if you put me in the Army Air Corps, I'll sign, the Official Secrets Act, and I want to learn to fly." And that, things like that do happen. We do, as human beings, we are more creative. We can come up with stuff. So yes, I believe that a lot of the stuff that's up in the air is stuff that we're flying, not just the extraterrestrial, or if it even is
Right.
at this point.
Two things come to mind, and one, some of the folks out there might remember Steely Dan and Doobie Brothers guitarist Jeff Skunk Baxter, who had an interest in propulsion systems on top of being a great guitarist, and ended up being a consultant to the government on missile technology and things like that. So it's not beyond the scope of, people to just read. He didn't have a degree in astrophysics or anything like that. He was just fascinated by the topic, and the government said, come on, you're on board with us.
Yeah.
The second thing is when I give the occasional talk to MUFON, maybe twice a year, and in our group of investigators, we have a woman who works for a defense contractor. And once in a while, she'll come to the MUFON meetings just for some moral support. And I'll be going on and on and on about all the rest of this, and she'll just be sitting in the back of the room doing this. She knows a lot more than she said, but she's
Sure.
very good.
Sure.
She's very good. You know, one of my closest friends in the world, and I can't find anything out. To the original question, some fundamentalist groups are already floating that extraterrestrials are fallen angels or demons.
Yeah.
You see, what are the parallels you see between those interpretations and the way paranormal phenomena have been traditionally, I don't know, framed through religious beliefs? And I mean, what does that tell you about human psychology? That I don't know if they're already, if they believe it or they're parsing their bets.
Well,
It,
first thing I should say is those people should read Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End book. That's the first thing they should do.
okay.
Um, the parallels here are that religion has always had its own well, in different cultures. So, I'm finishing up teaching a course on parapsychology and anthropology, kind of a cross-cultural look at beliefs in psychic abilities and as magic and things like that. And different cultures have different interpretations and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in the culture based on the experiences people have, or the abilities they put out. Sometimes it's only a special person like the shaman who is allowed to be psychic. In other cultures, everybody can. Some people are better than others. It just really depends on the culture. And the same thing goes with religion. But the problem with psychic abilities is that some people get more knowledge than perhaps the people in power. And religion has often been, organized religion has often been, even smaller groups, has often been about who has the power.
Right.
And it's not God. It's the person who is the head of the religion or who is the priest or whoever's advising them. So that's a big piece of that. And the one problem with calling them demons or angels is if they're angels, you worship them, and that's a bad thing. That's also dealt with in Disclosure Day to some extent. And the other side, if it's demons, that's going to cause some serious issues. Just like unfortunately, many religions demonize people who are different than them, humans that are different than them. They just demonize them. They're not actual demons, but they are evil people or they're bad people. And this is happening politically. We can see one side is really doing that quite a bit. So it's all human, unfortunately. And the message of the movie is probably going to be, I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be objecting who are fundamentalists or in certain groups are going to object to the religious argument that's in there, which is really a good one. And they're also going to be object to the idea that empathy is the highest level of development. Because we've already heard that as negative from people like Elon Musk.
Right. Well, I mean, there is talk now about a certain amount of fundamentalist Christians within the Pentagon. So now you wonder how this is all going to turn out.
Yeah.
If there's a belief there that these are malevolent entities, which abduction stories and experimentation and all the rest of that, I mean, again, that's the next show we'll have. But with all of that, there's a certain wariness about malevolence. So there's a concern.
I'm more worried about humans. I'm not worried about
Oh,
aliens.
you're damn right. You are damn
I am
right.
not worried about an ET invasion. I'm worried about, people. But even without the ETs, I'm still worried about people.
Yeah, because they've learned long ago that the apes down on that blue marble, they just love war. I mean, this is what they're especially good at.
Yeah.
Do you think, or what are your thoughts? Do people experience paranormal phenomena as they are, or do they experience through a filter of their cultural or religious beliefs? Where's that delineation?
So all psychic experiences, which include, ghosts and hauntings and all of that, they're all, the person who is experiencing these things is experiencing something psychic. It's partly them receiving that. And one of the things that we have learned in the field of parapsychology is that if you want to be more psychic, if you want to be open up a little bit more, you got to stop interpreting. You have to stop labeling, filtering, and doing all this. So even though people are potentially experiencing things as they're actually happening, the thinking about it is going to cause them to label them a certain way, interpret them a certain way, believe a certain thing about the experiences, about the phenomena. And this is cross-culturally. So if somebody sees a ghost in one culture, it's perfectly okay. It's a normal experience. In another culture, or even within the United States, it's the thing to run screaming from. So we see this on TV all the time in the paranormal shows. It's like you see a ghost, you want to see a ghost, and then you see a ghost and you start running, screaming from the building, right? On these shows, which
You're getting me started now. Here we go. I'm starting to get
yeah,
warmed up now.
it's just like the ultimate hypocrisy in some respects
I have been on 5,000 investigations, but still, as soon as I hear a noise, I bolt for the door. There's something counterintuitive.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, why are you doing the I mean, if it's a thrill ride you want, that's fine. But if you're trying to
Right.
figure out what's going on, I mean, people have always asked me, are you afraid when you go on investigations? And it's like, I'm not afraid of the paranormal. I am afraid sometimes of the living people that are
More
there.
so.
Yeah.
The living you need to keep a close eye.
Yeah. Because they carry guns and knives and other stuff. Yeah. But when it comes to things like apparitions and stuff like that, my first reaction is, oh, this is pretty cool. Let me ask them some questions.
Right. I am working on, and this is not an announcement, my first and only book. And I ask that question a lot. There's a lot of questions about the human condition and how much that I personally have learned about people in the decades that I've been doing this. How much of that is like people aren't necessarily trying to lie. I mean, you get hoaxers, you have people that are looking for attention, but the filters that I'm talking about, their worldview, the way they see things,
Right.
the lack of accountability or responsibility, palming it off on something unseen, invisible, supernatural, or whatever applies there. Yourself, after decades of investigating and researching paranormal phenomena, what have you learned about about human nature that has surprised you the most and or just kind of informed your approach to all of this?
That's a really good question. um, to me, it's surprising how talking to people who really want to experience something, who typically freak out or just assume the worst when they have an experience. And this is any psychic experience in general. And it's partly, you can go back and look at the question of why do they believe that? Why are they reacting that way? And honestly, it's programming. I mean, it's what you learned to believe, either from your religion, from your family, or from pop culture. And pop culture has more of an impact on people's beliefs these days.
Oh my God.
That includes the internet and everything else, than I think even religion does in some respects. You have thousands of ghost hunters out there because of TV shows saying ghosts only appear in the dark, or that's when you do investigations. They're never considering the fact that most people see ghosts during the daytime or when the lights are on.
It's true.
And they don't care.
It's true.
Because I've tried, that's surprising.
It's a trope.
Yeah, it's really that's surprising to me that so many people who are seemingly interested in understanding this stuff really are not interested in understanding. They're interested in having an experience and gathering their evidence and, making whatever they want out of the evidence, but they're not really interested in the question of what's really going on.
Well, back in the days of the Dark Ages when we were growing up, And I know you out there have a hard time believing this, but cell phones didn't exist. The internet didn't
Right.
exist.
Right.
So the information or this, maybe people's attitudes and that filter that I refer to has always been there, but the delivery system is different now in
Yeah.
terms of social media
Yeah.
and all of this overload of
We
opinions
are
and
we are
information.
overloaded. We are absolutely overloaded with information. But the media has always had, pop culture has always had an impact. I mean, just going back to the movie The Exorcist in 1973 and its impact on the Ouija board. Prior to
This day.
that, I knew an author who wrote about psychic things, and he said he was in Catholic school and they were using Ouija boards in Catholic school until the day after The Exorcist came out. And the stories that have kind of come up and people never questioning them because
Yeah.
other than people in very specific people who wrote about the Ouija board as evil, because any spirit communication attempt is evil and can invite in evil. That was their statement about this. It wasn't just the Ouija board, it was anything, which means that EVP is absolutely evil. You're inviting in evil.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, doing anything with a spirit box, you're inviting in evil. If you believe the Ouija board is evil, you have to believe these other tools that everybody uses in ghost hunting. Those are evil too. So it's been an impact because often it's because people believe when it says it's based on a true story that this is the true story. It happened certainly with Amityville. It happened with the Entity movie, with things like that. These days movies usually say it's inspired by a true story, which is more honest, I think. But still, people believe it's true, no matter what it is.
Yeah. I've done more articles and talks as far as we've done it right here on the show, the Ouija board. And such an incredible point that a Ouija board at one point was something that a couple could use that were courting, and you place it on your
Right.
knees, and you get to touch knees with the girl, and this was
Right.
really cool. And Norman Rockwell is painting pictures of that, and then along comes Captain Howdy and just blows the whole thing up in everybody's face. Now it's a portal to hell.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is that before even the Ouija board was created, was patented in the late 1800s, people were making their own version of that at home because everybody was into spiritualism in some way, shape, or form, even if it was just for fun. In the afternoon tea, they'd have a circle of letters and numbers on a table and an upturned glass. They put a finger on it and would move around. That's what happened. And then the idea of making an actual board is kind of like the home version of the TV game show, and it was a way for somebody to make a lot of money. That's and also convenient to people. They didn't have to make their own cards, but it's never been, it was never even considered necessarily as the best way to communicate with spirits.
Okay, so what do you think reveals itself more? With its the paranormal experiences reveal more about the phenomena itself, or do they reveal more about the person that's experiencing it? Or are we talking apples and oranges, or are we talking apples and apples here?
Well, I mean, basically, without the experiences people have, you don't have phenomena. I mean, the experiences include observations as well. So it always bugged me when I see these TV shows or some of the ghost hunters at conferences saying, we don't talk to witnesses or to anybody who's had an experience because that's anecdotal evidence. It's like, well, then what are you doing? I mean, what are you investigating? Because that's the ghost story. If you don't have a ghost story, you have nothing to investigate.
That's it.
And then if you experience something on TV, how come we should believe you if you don't believe the witnesses as well? We don't have anything to study without human experience. That's what it is. There is phenomena, technically I exist, you exist. We're on a virtual connection right now. If there is consciousness after death, what we call a ghost or an apparition, they exist. So there is that potential objective issue, as long as we actually figure out what consciousness is, which is something we still haven't figured out in science at this point. But for the most part, any event that happens outside outside in the world that we observe or experience is subject to subjective interpretation. including reading a book, walking in the park. I mean, all of that, your perception and my perception may be slightly different. What we notice in the environment, what we hear in the environment, it's personal, it's individual, it's not the same for everybody.
Right.
And then the interpretation of that is not the same for everybody. And you can certainly take a look at that cross-culturally when you do something in one culture. And I'll give you an example, that a magician, I believe was David Blaine in one of his early specials, was doing, I mean, he did a lot of card tricks in his street magic stuff, right? And he ended up going down to South America and into the Amazon with an anthropologist, and did a card trick for the Yanomami, for a group there. And they were not impressed. They actually saw right through every move he made, because they were not taught how cards behave. They didn't even know what cards were, honestly.
Yeah.
Then he did pretty much the exact same sleight of hand with leaves. They were blown away, because leaves don't behave that way.
Right.
So you have, and this is the reason why I have a training in magic, and I do work as a mentalist. You can't do certain tricks for little kids, because they will see right through the sleight of hand. On the other hand, you can do a lot of different kinds of tricks for little kids that don't fool adults. So it's about development, it's about exposure, it's about perceptual expectancy. We expect that when you cut a rope in half, it's in two pieces, and then when you tie it together, you should not be able to slip the knot off, and there's now one piece of rope. That's how that magic trick works. It works because we're surprised that that's not how things work. That's our perceptual expectancy based on how we learn to perceive the world.
I think that long ago, I gave up on this thing, proving anything to science, because of one of the reasons you say. These are all human experiences. Now, we've been fortunate, and this doesn't happen all the time, to be able to document some things, whether it's
Right.
on video. And I rarely use the word paranormal. I prefer unexplained, not just to hedge my bets, but there's been too many instances upon further review that you say, okay, it's plausible that this happened. So you have to keep that in mind. With that said, would you say that expectation or confirmation bias is probably the biggest thing that an investigator has to overcome? Even those that, listen, we all want to experience something. We have to be
Right.
objective. We have to be honest with ourselves. But, damn it, it's still human beings doing this thing. And, it's not an easy thing to check yourself at the door all the time.
You do have to learn how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
That's really important. I like to call myself a situational skeptic, using the word skeptic as in doubter, not disbeliever, because in every given situation, I have to look at things from all angles. Now, that said, I could believe that, personally, I think, yeah, this is really a ghost, but the evidence and the way it's happening, I'm not sure from that perspective. So you have to kind of divorce yourself from what you personally believe about something and what the experience, what the observations, what the evidence all shows,
Right.
what says. And you have to look through all the different angles from that for that reason. It's really important to do that. Again, I've had experiences where I'm convinced personally this was a ghost, but I couldn't prove it to you. I couldn't
Right.
even give you direct evidence other than my experience
Right.
for that. And so we have to look across the board at what are the patterns in these experiences. That's what parapsychology does. We look at the patterns of people's experiences. And when you come up with something that is out of the pattern, you got to wonder why that is. And often, inevitably, it comes down to the person's interpretation, or something physical in the environment, which can change the pattern too. That's there. But the patterns pretty much have held for over 140 years in terms of the way ghosts seem to appear, the way hauntings happen. And we don't have exact knowledge of what's behind these things, partly because we don't have enough knowledge of human consciousness, which is us as witnesses. And it's also the ghosts as maybe existing on their own. There's not even an agreed upon definition of consciousness in science, in mainstream science. at all, not at this point. It's what David Trelmer's called the hard problem of science. It's also something we have to remember, that consciousness is the one thing that it studies itself.
Yes.
And that makes it very difficult, because we're kind of inside the box with it.
Yeah. Well, this is where AI, somehow I see this leaning toward, a sentient consciousness. But
Let's hope not.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I've had instances, you probably have too, where the witness's sincerity convinced you that there was something going on, even if the evidence didn't. Because, you kind of read people, and I guess it's the old, I believe that they believe that something happened. I
Yeah.
believe they're being
Yeah.
sincere. I believe that they're anxious and
Well, and I, that's fine. The problem is, and this is it again, interpretation and where they're starting from. So, as an example, someone says we have a malevolent entity in our house, and I have to ask questions like, "Tell me first what happened. What'd you experience?" And then finding out what the behavior of that thing was actually contradicts what they're saying it's malevolent. It's like, okay, maybe he's an asshole, but he's not malevolent in the way we think of it. Or you're blaming something that's happening to you on some experience you've had, which may not even be real. People can be very sincere. I had a case many years ago that I talk about in all my classes, that the couple and their kids, basically it's 4 people living in a house. They had moved in a few months before. The experiences included a room that felt weird and they would get nauseous and headaches, included seeing shadows out of the corner of their eyes. There were noxious odors sulfurous odors that would appear in midair, and they'd just smell them and they'd go away. They occasionally saw fireballs and sparks in midair, and sometimes burn marks would appear on the walls and appliances. There were a couple other things as well. It was all environmental. They sincerely believed something was, in fact, they tried to get out of their lease. We went in there and we found an explanation for each part of it that individually explained one piece of what they were experiencing. The house itself was in a bad situation next on the other side of a hill from a landfill, a lot of static electricity. There was some insulation that was causing high static. They were under power lines. They were also giving off low frequency sound as well as high frequency sound. I mean, there were so many things. Yeah, it was like a checklist of really bad stuff. The only thing they didn't have is black mold, which was good. But they basically sincerely believe this phenomena, and we have to go in and not only look at the overall case, but each individual reported event. That's the way we do investigations. And even in the best cases, I will say that with rare exception, I've had exceptions, but in rare exception, when people have a range of experiences, a range of reports of what the activity is, we can start checking off or crossing off a whole bunch of them because we find explanations for them.
Right.
Even if there's something genuinely paranormal at the center of that. Because people, when they're freaked out or encounter something that they're not used to, automatically are overly sensitive to things that they didn't think about trying to explain. There was a survey done of realtors after, I think it was 2021, so it was after COVID. And the results it was because some of the realtors were complaining to the realty associations that their former clients, the clients that they sold houses to before COVID, were calling them up and telling them their houses are haunted. They got a lot more reports.
Oh my God.
And it turned out the realtors figured out what was going on. I mean, this was the thing. They had a huge upswing of this across the United States. The younger people the more likely they were to report the place being haunted. Older people, like our age, didn't think that so much for reasons that are obvious, I think, to you and me. But basically, this was the first time these people had ever been locked in their house for 24 hours a day for weeks on end. And they never noticed the house settling noises and what happens in a house at night. And they assumed that they were paranormal because they were watching a lot of TV.
Well, consumers of this type of content immediately go to a default mechanism.
Right.
That's their default mechanism. And it's, okay, that's the third show we're going to have where we're just going to talk about that. I had a question for you, but I want to bring George in, so I'm going to save it for when I come back. But
Okay.
I appreciate you,
Thank
George.
you.
Good luck. Take it away.
Hey, George.
Thank you very much, Ken. Hey, Lloyd. I would like for you to, if you've had discussions, debates, dialogue about this, your assessment of what should our mandate be in this field? Do we have an end game? Do we have a mission statement of what it is that we're trying to achieve? This has been burning a hole in my brain for the last 3 or 4 years, mainly. And it's just the fact that we don't seem to have direction. It's just the replay of here's the evidence we caught here, we're putting it out here, things of that sort. But have you had discussions about that? What should we be doing? What should we be aiming for in this field?
Well, first thing I have to say is there needs to be better education in the paranormal community. We're good in parapsychology, but partly because the TV celebs rarely ever mention that word, and in fact, depending on the show, there was a number of shows that were basically saying this is not parapsychology. Parapsychology is only ESP in the lab. They weren't saying it, but in fact, our field started with field work. It started with investigating mediums. It started with investigating people's experiences outside of the lab. It started back in the 1800s with investigating hauntings and other things. And we have learned from the investigative process what typically needs to happen, how that can be adapted for other kinds of cases. We have learned to assess the reports and the evidence. And we don't put a lot of stock at all, by the way, in anything from technology without a human experience backing it up. In fact, it's basically, an EMF reading that's unusual or unexplained is an EMF reading that's unexplained. If the people think it's because the house is haunted, that's great, but I need to know that it's happening when people are experiencing something. Otherwise, it's just an unexplained EMF reading that may have an explanation if we really look closely. So it starts with the human experience, and the mandate should be, we need to be more focused on interviewing the people, finding the patterns, looking for alternative explanations before even seeing about what kind of evidence there actually might be. And in fact, if you have multiple witnesses and you separate them, or they're over time and they're experiencing the same thing, there's something going on. It may not be paranormal, but we have to figure out what's going on. So we're always trying to figure out what's actually happening, whether it's paranormal or not. But it's all about education. And it's not like people have to take courses. There are some good books out there, but there's a lot of crap out there too.
Take it to that next level. Let's make a hypothetical world where that is being achieved. The education is there.
Yeah.
The techniques are being perfected. What is the ultimate goal, though, in our dialogue through the veil?
Well, we have to consider that all of what we gather, the information we gather, gives us an understanding of patterns of human experience, which say something both about us being psychic or not, but also about there possibly being phenomena that is stuff we're picking up on, whether that you call that a ghost or residual haunting. Poltergeists come from living people. We actually have tons of data on that kind of thing. So it really is, the end game is we're trying to figure out what this stuff is. We're trying to figure out what makes people psychic. We're trying to understand whether there is good support for consciousness surviving the death of the body. That would be a ghost. The basic problem there is we don't know what consciousness is. And until that happens, I don't see that we're going to really go much further other than getting the support of that. But also part of this should be that with all the experiences people have with everything, there needs to be a push back to mainstream science. That not
Yes.
looking at these experiences is unscientific. Saying, oh, there's nothing to ESP. Okay, people have these experiences. Are you studying them as to why they're having them if it's not ESP? And the answer to that's no. So that's unscientific. And there's a lot of unscientific stuff that we hear from the mainstream community, especially the people who call themselves skeptics, who are really cynics and pseudo skeptics, who will not even look at a parapsychology scientific paper that has already been run through peer review and actually already been acknowledged by some other scientist in mainstream science who says this is really well controlled. I don't understand why you people aren't looking at it.
I find, as far as my opinion to our end game kind of a scenario, that first of all, whatever the restrictions are, and I'm not just talking about the human condition and what we're able to pick up on, but even evidence collected, knowing what happens after we die, that whole big umbrella, I think is outside of our purview and should
Yeah.
be. Um, but I, before my passing, before I'm done on this earth, I would love to be able to know that we've left something here that allows us to simply be able to engage in the simplest of dialogue, be it through a piece of equipment, a technique, a location, whatever it may be, that we could just speak to our loved ones. Just, we've heard the stories, Lloyd, through
Hmm.
through decades, if not centuries, of loved ones coming back after passing saying, I'm okay, go on with your life. That seems to be a common phrase that goes on. But to be able to hear it firsthand from your loved one, whether they are visible or it's just the audible. But I think, again, having that being able to be developed into a consistency, I think is a great healing. Hell, how many people spend millions of dollars realistically, but each one that goes out there to speak to a psychic, and the psychic repeats exactly that, whether it's real or not, it helps that person heal with
Right.
the loss of a loved one. But to be able to have that one on one, I recognize the voice, I recognize the image, and that's my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, whatever it may be. To be able to have that kind of consistent dialogue is something that I would hope that the field would aspire to reach.
So I work with mediums quite a bit. I am president of an organization also called the Forever Family Foundation, which tests. We have a scientific controlled test to certify evidential mediums, those who can come through with significant amounts of information that's verifiable under controlled conditions. And the thing about mediumship is that's important to know, and this kind of communication you're talking about, is it's a two-way communication.
Correct.
So it's not just about us, it's about the dead people. So they
Right.
have to be able to talk to us. I have sat through numerous large group readings and small group readings from some of our mediums at our grief retreats, our conferences. We actually have a conference coming up in Burbank, California in October as well. And I've sat through, and people, will say, the medium will start getting somebody through, and the person will recognize it. And we have good mediums, and they'll actually walk over to the person. I said, this person is coming through to you. Here's what the person says, and so on. I don't want to talk to him. That's my father. I don't want to talk to him. I want to talk to my mother. I came here to talk to my mother. Well, your father is saying your mother's not available. Well, then you're a bad medium. It's like, it's a two-way phone call. You can't simply call somebody's house and expect that they're going to be home all the time. So until, it may not matter that we develop some form of technology that allows us to communicate with our loved ones. They have to communicate with us. They have to do that. And then there's two levels here. One is what we call the ghost or apparition, the ones who are still kind of hanging around here and they haven't moved on to the other side, whatever that means. And then they're the ones that project back and work through mediums. So that kind of experience, it takes either skill or training to recognize. And it's not been the case that, one of the reasons we have a problem with technology is because there's no technology we have shown, anybody has shown, that can capture anything conscious. We can't even show that PK, psychokinesis, from a living person works, although we have had people who affect computers, tape recorders, all sorts of stuff. We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know what the process of communication is. It's like we have a radio. but we don't know whether there's is it AM, is it FM, is it some other band, is it shortwave? We haven't come up with that kind of device yet at this point. I'd love to see that happen, but science needs to develop more understanding of consciousness itself from more than a philosophical perspective. And our field, parapsychology, is right at the center of that. We have more and more people from mainstream science who are interested in consciousness coming to our field to see what we've done over the years.
What is a presiding theory in your circle, in your group that you talk about, that this ability, this psychic ability, this sixth sense is actually doing? Again, is it piercing through the veil? And some of us have a stronger ability than others. Now, I have seen and I have done experiments for collective consciousness where people who didn't even know they had the ability, and I think everybody does if they
Right.
tap into it correctly, can really be able to connect not only with spirit but with each other at the same time. So, what is the presiding theory as to what this psychic ability is?
Well, first, it is a continuum. We do know that kids are more psychic than adults because we get basically programmed and educated out of being psychic.
Yes.
It is something that seems to be the model we have right now of the ESP, of information. And by the way, it's not a sense at all. Calling it the sixth sense is wrong because it's not a sense. It's a form of consciousness perceiving the world. It's direct perception. That's the emphasis on the P, not the E, or not the S, I should say.
Right.
So it is something we are scanning the environment. I mean, there's one theory or model of ESP where we're constantly scanning the environment, but our normal senses are so good that unless it's something like, somebody holding up the shiny keys and jangling them, we don't notice that stuff. And everyone who really is getting involved in the field, who understands anything about being more psychic, including certain psychics we've worked with, have always said you have to notice you already have that information coming in, and you have to learn to separate it from your normal senses, what your senses are getting for that. And that includes spirit contact. It may be that you pick up something about a spirit and you immediately say, oh, it's my mind that is just simply making that up. So we have to learn to question things differently in that respect as well. People do have a different aptitude. We talk about the remote viewing program, the Stargate program. Joe McMoneagle, who was the #1 viewer, the best viewer, he's mentioned a number of times that he would practice. He does still practice remote viewing a few times a week and does that. He's involved in some research with my colleague Ed May from time to time. And Joe says, I hit a ceiling. I can't get any better, even with practice. So it seems like, and I've talked to other psychics who said the same thing. Here's my ability. Here's my application. I can't get any better than that. We see the same thing with art. We see the same thing with music with certain people. They have aptitudes to certain instruments or certain types of music or art.
Right.
They can get really good at that. They try something else, forget about it. It's just not part of them. So there's a lot more we have to learn about creativity, about human beings in general, and human performance. Psychology, by the way, is the big thing for us. In some respects, the idea of psychokinesis, of moving objects. I mentioned my friend Martin Caden. He was capable of doing stuff under controlled conditions. And there's a performance issue that was identified by one of our parapsychology folks, Ken Batcheldor, back in the late 60s, that actually led to the Philip experiment, which you might have heard of.
Yes.
And basically it amounts to the fact that because this is such a weird thing in our culture, it's really hard for us to even witness it. We question other people who tell us about their experiences. And if something were to move, we'd absolutely question whether that we really saw that. That's called witness inhibition. It's because we're programmed that way. But you get past that, you still have ownership resistance. Did I do that? I don't know that I want to do that, because that means my thoughts get turned into action, and that means accountability and responsibility and other things. And it's the same thing with psychic ability in general. We have to get past these performance issues. And by the way, these are similar performance issues to sports psychology.
How so?
That whole idea of doubting yourself, this is not just sports psychology, it's human performance psychology in general. If you doubt you can do something, you probably won't be able to do it or do it well.
Gotcha.
Um, and then there's the issue of what the rules are. Roger Bannister ran the 4 minute mile in 1954 at a time when everybody in the world said nobody can run that fast. It's not physically impossible for a human being to run that fast. Within a few years, many people ran a 4 minute mile because somebody did it. And my dad was a TV sports producer. I did talk to some athletes and some coaches about this sort of thing years and years ago when I was writing my Mind Over Matter book. And it really boils down to what's acceptable and even what the conditions are. Because if somebody excelled in the 1990s, if you think about this, if an athlete did too well, the first thing that would happen is drug testing.
Yeah.
For steroids. So there's no, motivation to do that well because you're going to get in trouble, even if you haven't taken drugs.
It's interesting when we talked about the believability part of it. One of the things that we'll tend to do on our Monday night Patreon channel, on occasion, I will do a test with everybody that's on screen with me with remote viewing. We've done it on probably 3 or 4 occasions so far. And the validation, while important, is nowhere near to the percentage of accuracy that we hit with them, which is 85%.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes right back to science, or as I've always called it, science as we know it, because science is always changing. New discoveries happen every day,
Right.
and theories are misproven. So when it comes to what we are doing just in the small realm of a small little podcast and other podcasts and other investigations where they do collective consciousness or remote viewing, uh, that practice needs to find a stronger outlet because you know this as well as I do. You take somebody who's never had an experience, suddenly have an experience, and now their entire mindset changes. Now they're curious. Now they want to experience more. And that's what we're still lacking, I think, in the science field is that mental state of, it's not right there on paper. There's no formula that we can draw up for these
Right.
experiences, for remote viewing, things of that sort. And and that's a shame because I think that is a big hindrance for us progressing in this field and learning more about what our capabilities are and the capabilities of the spirits on the other side.
Yeah, and frankly, part of the process here is there is a lack of funding for any work in this field.
Yes.
And it didn't used to be as bad as it's been for the last 20 years. And part of that was because of the organized skeptics groups making it, in the United States at least, toxic
Yeah.
in academics to even talk about this stuff. I think with the focus on consciousness and the question of consciousness, that is changing. There are more people in the neurosciences who are saying, wait a minute, consciousness is not just the brain. There's too much happening here that just doesn't work. And we need to see more of that where, unfortunately, they have their critics too, who are pure materialists. And part of our problem here for all of us is that materialism is the basis of modern science, and it has been for 100 years, over 100 years. But that says everything is touchable, it's physical, it's that. There's more to it. And, you can't really touch light, but we know light is a physical thing. You can't touch air. Air is touching us. I mean, there are things we don't know in science, yet are still being done, just being accepted as normal. There's all sorts of new research coming out on the brain, and new things are being learned, and they need to be incorporated in the model, in the actual model within science. But it's being ignored because people are still resistant to change.
Yeah. I mean, if we had a sect of society out there that did question light and questioned air, I mean, there would still be people out there to follow them. Just to say,
Well, I mean,
well, flat earthers as an
right. I
example,
was going to say the flat earthers, the moon landing,
yeah,
folks who deny that.
conspiracy theorists,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and yet we find ourselves here again, looking at things I mean, not surprising that there are the naysayers that are out there, but I would almost say tangible at this point in time. Look, even 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have the exposure that we have now via the internet, via
Right.
screens, and everybody's posting out their evidence out there right now. Now, you have also the fakers, which makes it harder for us. But there's so much of a momentum with all this exposure via the camera for UFOs, for cryptids, for ghosts, that you would think again there would be some sort of a scientific sect out there that would say this is such a phenomena that's going on globally. Maybe we do need to look more into this. And yet you don't see that anywhere scientifically in the world, in any country. That's the bizarre, with the exception of, particular projects like you're talking about Stargate and what the Russians did in the 1960s with remote viewing. I mean, there are those little sects to it, but
There are places. I mean, you have in the UK. There's a lot more going on there. In Brazil, there's a lot more going on there. The United States is stuck in some respects. There are people in different parts, and labs that are looking at things, and there are folks in other fields that, like I said, are coming to understand that there's something here that needs to be studied. But it's people, people don't want to be wrong, and they're going to have to change their minds.
yeah, if anything else, it's one of those things that your mistakes help you to learn. It's
Yeah.
checks and balances in this field, and if this is not working or you can't find a consistency on it, then adjust to try to find that consistency in whatever it is that we're doing. Do you think that the energies after we pass, and even while we're still alive, I believe that those spirits are omnipresent, no different than what we consider to be God, but that we are part of a collective. And I think even when we're living, we just, again, have our social programming restrictions in our brain that we could be in multiple places at one time.
So one suggested model of consciousness, which is definitely not materialist, is that consciousness is not even located in our brains.
Good point.
That we are
Connected.
the receivers and transmitters of information. That it's like we're getting a spike of information from the cloud.
Download.
Well, yeah, we're getting a download. And as we experience life in this body, we upload that information back to the cloud in that sense. The contradict, when people hear that, then you get the materialist saying, well, but if somebody has brain damage, they can't experience things. They said, well, when your TV set, which is hooked up to cable, when that breaks, if the TV breaks, did the signal from the cable break? The signal's still coming through. It's just the TV itself isn't showing you what's coming through. It's a different thing if the cable company turns off the signal. That's a different story. But the receiver doesn't necessarily. You can damage a radio, but the radio signal's
Wow.
there. You can.
Wow,
I
what a
mean,
great analogy.
it's. We have to look at the idea that consciousness is like around here, whether it's in the cloud, somewhere else, or and coming through us. There are many different non-materialist models, some of which are the brain as it forms consciousness for you, and then it goes on to, it exists after death. There's different ideas in physics of what it could physically be. People are often talking about, well, energy doesn't go away. Well, the body or the energy of our bodies actually dissipates as heat. Heat energy is energy, right? It doesn't go like suddenly cease to exist. There's still other energy that gets dissipated that goes on. But that doesn't mean that consciousness is the same thing, because consciousness could be, we don't know what consciousness is.
No.
I love this one comic book I read. There was a panel in it where Jim Shooter, the writer, said, one of the characters said, so-and-so thinks that consciousness is generated by the brain, but when you die, because in the brain we have nanotubules and all sorts of quantum computing more or less going on, that kind of thing, that when you die, the quantum particles are a field and they stay intact. They're coherent. So that's your consciousness afterwards. And I think that was kind of a cool way of looking at it. I always looked at science fiction because you can speculate all you want and you don't get in trouble with
Right.
the mainstream folks.
Not so much perception as reception.
Yeah,
what we're receiving in from the cloud, and then, and again, when we go, that consciousness maybe returns to the cloud.
right.
That's I firmly agree with you 100%. I really stayed over my time, and Ken's been waiting patiently, so I'll bring him back on. When we come back, though, I'd love to, unless Ken's already got this jot down, talk to you a little bit about AI. So,
Let's see, I had a question. Do you think consciousness is produced by the brain, or could the brain be acting more like a receiver or filter?
I mean, I
I'll
have.
throw that
Okay.
one out.
Yeah, I mean, I have no personal preference for one or the other. I don't really know which one it is.
Yeah, we'll kind of keep the ball rolling. Question: Skeptics and believers.
Uh-huh.
Do they sometimes suffer from the same psychological blind spots when it comes to the paranormal, except obviously on different ends of that spectrum?
So actually, and I really want to make a distinction because unfortunately the committee, the psychop folks, the people who call themselves skeptics, they have made skeptic a dirty word in our world, because skeptic means you haven't decided yet. You are a doubter, but you want to see the evidence, and you may never decide. That's a true.
Skeptical, if I could, I don't mean to interrupt, but just a
No, no.
distinction in
What
my
I
mind. A skeptic and being skeptical are two different things.
Yeah, that didn't used to be the case. It really did not used to be the case. It was because of the disbelievers who took that term. And in fact, one of the folks who was involved in the founding of that committee and then left because he found that the rest of the group were in fact disbelievers, called them pseudo skeptics or cynics, basically. So we have the disbelievers at one end, we have the diehard believers at the other, we have the skeptics in the middle, the true skeptics in the middle.
Right.
There is definitely a blind spot. There's faith in their interpretations and biases at either end. The true disbeliever and the true believer. They're not that different in behavior. The true disbeliever will immediately disbelieve anything that is outside their realm of their little worldview. And the true believer will believe pretty much anything anybody tells them that sounds good. It's amazing to me sometimes, because somebody had a TV show, suddenly they're an authority in the subject. And I'm not just talking about the paranormal. It's like seems to be anything.
Anything at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's maddening sometimes at the lengths that, and we're talking about, the far left and the far right.
Right.
If you
Maybe
will.
it's the far up and the far down instead
Exactly.
of yeah. Yeah.
The lengths that people will go to either prove or disprove a claim. It's like, wailed sounds from a nearby ocean or something like that. It's like, dude, you're trying way too hard here.
Yeah. Yeah, and what it's like, kind of I've read about some flat earthers who did their own experiments and proved to themselves that the Earth was not flat, but they still wouldn't admit the Earth isn't flat. The Earth is flat. I must have been mistaken or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is why conspiracy theories start. Lack of knowledge, lack of information. We fill in gaps.
And sometimes lack of thinking about, just from a common sense perspective, about the history. I mean, I've had to deal with a few people who are, believers that the moon landing never happened. And the first thing I say to them is, which one? Because it's not just Apollo 11. There were a bunch of them. But more importantly, there's a TV show called For All Mankind on Apple TV. What would have happened if the Russians got there first? So do you really think the Russians would have let us get away with faking a moon landing?
I mean, was just going to say that with the Chinese and the Russians.
The Chinese, the Russians, France, every country was watching that landing and the signals where they were coming from. And then you have to also include the fact that you're accusing something like hundreds of thousands of people at NASA who were involved in the process of hiding a secret, which, by the way, won't work.
Well, what did Franklin say? Two people can keep a secret if one of them's dead.
Right.
Well, I mean, they can see with satellite image. They can see the Sea of Tranquility. They see the flag. They see, the candy bar wrappers they left behind or whatever.
It's all there now. I mean, now, now it's even harder for me to. I saw something on It was actually a comedian show, and he was interviewing people from QAnon, and they had a group of people who were moon landing deniers, and one of the four guys says, "Yeah, they use CGI." In 1969, and the other three actually looked at him like he was nuts, which was a good reaction, I thought. It didn't really register much, but I've heard that people believe that we had advanced computer graphics at that point, and
Right.
you know,
Well, we
actually we
feel
didn't need
like,
computer.
as I say, the lack of or the denial of facts
Yeah,
creates gaps. Excuse me, creates gaps. And those gaps are filled in, and this is how conspiracy theories begin, because
right.
either the truth is not forthcoming or it's false, whatever whatever applies there. Um, I
I
want
wanted to say one thing, and so much of this, the true belief, true disbelief, conspiracy theories, is because people need an answer. They want something definitive. They
yeah,
can't deal with uncertainty. And in this field, you have to learn about uncertainty. You may never get an answer, and you have to be okay with that.
well, the
Doesn't mean
thing
you
is,
shouldn't look.
when they talk about repeatable lab experiments, we might have had this conversation before. When they talk about, the scientific method, there are elements I think that you can use of the scientific method, but
Right.
we're not in an antiseptic lab because if we are dealing with human consciousness, whether that is on another plane or here, humans by nature are very volatile creatures. We have different moods. We have different characteristics. We don't repeat the same behaviors all the time. And if we carry those characteristics with us in death, then we're still volatile, ups and
Right.
downs. And, I say, Loyd, we went to this location and ABC happened. Well, I'm going to go there too, and I'm going to do the same things, and nothing happens for you. So, immediately by the scientific method, anything I documented or experienced, invalid. And it doesn't, and I'm not trying to make excuses
No,
for
no,
it. I'm
I know
not.
what you're getting at. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but but
So
it doesn't work that way.
it doesn't even work that way in the lab. Psychology experiments don't have a great replication rate because you're doing experiments with different people,
Yeah.
and different people react differently to different situations.
Different stimuli.
Yeah. So you can pull certain stuff out of that and find patterns, but the replication rate's pretty low. In fact, we have a better replication rate in parapsychology because we're not looking at the behavior of the person in many respects. But the other thing, in terms of investigations and such, it's absurd to me that people think that the ghost is going to be there for them every time somebody goes. I mean, if we're talking about a human consciousness, a human being after death, and ghosts are people too, why in the world would you expect them to adhere to your schedule to be there? And why in the world would you expect them to stick around if you start yelling at them or asking them to do something for you, without being at least friendly and upfront? Because a human being, again, the personality doesn't change. And the original phrase for consciousness after death or survival of death was human personality after death. The personality doesn't seem to change. There's no reason you should, if you're dealing with a residual haunting, you should find patterns. If you're dealing with a conscious entity, it's, if the ghost has OCD and always does the same thing every night, then you might be in luck. But otherwise, they may be off doing something else. They may not want to talk to you. I have had this discussion with some groups saying, well, we got this get out on EVP. I said, yeah, and what were you doing right before the get out on EVP? I said, what do you mean? It's like, they were yelling for the ghost to do something. And it's like, well, if I was that ghost and I was able to hit you upside the head, that's what I would have done. But then that would have branded me a demon, of course, right off the bat,
Well,
right? The get out.
let's look at it from that perspective for a minute. Okay, so I go And actually, I have been multiple times to the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River, Massachusetts. So I walk
Right.
in. Hello, Lizzie. My name is Ken. And I can't hear it, but she could be there. Hi, Ken. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to meet you. So, did you kill your father and mother? Oh, God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be a
Let,
touchy
let, let,
subject,
let's
right?
let's start off with the worst day of your life as an introduction.
Right, right. No, you're absolutely right. I've always taught my students that being friendly, even being a little humorous, not with the family that's there, with the witnesses that are there. You want to get them at ease. You want to get them maybe not laughing, but really okay with everything. And then also be very friendly towards the supposed ghost that's there. We've actually had activity happen for us. Granted, not on camera because they tend to want to do it behind the camera, but we've had physical activity and other things in a whole number of cases over the years because we're treating them with respect and
Mm-hmm.
like people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go in with any other attitude, either nothing's going to happen or something possibly negative will happen because you're behaving that way and they're going to reflect your behavior.
Sure.
And labeling them malevolent or demonic because of that is not respectful. That's disrespect.
I mean, if you go in and for me, if I'm respectful and conciliatory and all those things, and absolutely nothing, big nothing happens, I can walk away from it feeling
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
It's like, hey, Al, we were good people. We hung out okay, but you know, um, I mean, I don't know. I go back. There was a guy named John Moore who was on the board of Psychop, and I think sometime back in the oh god, maybe early 2000s, he wrote a paper in which he warned or reinforced the point that a skeptic takes on the claim, not the claimant. In other words, if you immediately start name calling or whatever, then your bias comes to the
right, right.
surface. And now you've kind of lost a little bit of that objectivity. And we
Yeah,
see an incredible amount of that now.
yeah. I just thinking back to the Amazing Randy calling people stupid and dumb just makes me think of
That's,
somebody else in politics today.
that's what I'm
Uh,
saying.
it just he was so dismissive of people's experiences.
Yeah.
Um, Typically, would call them, gullible. Gullibility was always the thing that I would hear from these pseudo skeptics. These people are gullible. They're stupid. They're uneducated. It's like, yeah, no. That couple that I talked about, the family I talked about with all the environmental stuff, they didn't have the education to know what to look for. That's all it was.
Right.
So, and frankly, given everything that happened, somebody could write a script about that and turn that into a really easy haunted house movie because of all that physical stuff that was going on. Yes, it all had explanations, but nothing that they would ever have thought of because that was not in their background or education.
Yeah, and that immediately is like some kind of strike against them. That is so
Right,
myopic
right.
and
Incredibly myopic.
dismissive. But if anybody knows anything about James Randi, if you've ever read anything, he was not a real happy man. He was not a
You could
real
pretty tell. You could tell he wasn't. Yeah.
he there was some issues there. Um and they, sometimes like he's human like everybody else, although he'd probably deny it. Sometimes those issues seep into your work, whether you
Hmm.
like them or not.
Right.
So as far as like two things with the mind, projection and perception. And this might explain why, and we've got these calls, you probably have too, where someone sees, let's say, their grandfather, but they saw their grandfather as a 19-year-old serviceman
Hmm.
in World War II standing out by their shed. So there seems to be two things at work here: projection and perception.
Yes.
In other words, I'm sending you this. Your brain is, however it's happening, is perceiving another thing. So, I mean, how much do we accept that or actually understand about perception, and those gaps in it, could they explain some of the experiences people have because they don't quite understand how all of this works? I've tried to explain this to the experiencers who brought me this case, and yeah, I'm not saying it was trying to like teach a dog algebra. That's not what I'm saying at all. They're lovely people, but they don't come from that world.
So when I was a little kid, I had a lot of questions about ghosts because I was watching comedies like Topper and One Step Beyond, that show, and there were a lot of fun ghost shows back then.
Sure.
And I wondered about the ghost stories I was reading because first thing I wondered is, where do ghosts get their clothes from?
Mm-hmm.
That's an important question. Looking at the actual experiences that were reported over the last 100+ years, you don't ever typically find naked ghosts in our culture. I mean, in certain cultures where people run around naked, you do find them, but not in our culture. And ghosts do tend to show up to people, especially people who knew them, looking healthier than they did and younger than they did when they died.
Yes.
But that's important. The important thing is, all right, so you are dead. You do not have a body. All you have is your own self-image. So this is something I used to do with all my college lectures. I still do it in my classes. I tell people, and anybody listening or watching this can just close your eyes for a moment and get a picture of yourself in your head. If you can. If you can visualize, picture yourself. Most people over a certain age are going to think of themselves younger.
Right.
There's the stereotype that most guys think of themselves as 30 years old or something like that, 35, right? You're going to picture yourself you probably pictured yourself with clothing on, but think about the clothing. And so when I was doing this in large audiences, when I was doing college lecture tours, and I sometimes had hundreds, a couple occasions, thousands of students in the audience, I'd say, okay, so for everybody here who pictured themselves, if you pictured yourselves down to your feet, raise your hands. And I would get a very small percentage of the audience. Most people only pictured themselves down to their knees, above and below their knees. Then I would ask, for the folks who remember, picture yourself down to your feet, keep your hands up if you buy a lot of shoes. And about half the people kept their hands up. Mm-hmm. Because that's part of their fashion sense and their self-image. So if you are dead without a body, your self-image will be whatever you think of yourself. One case that I've done for years, haven't done anything with them for the last few years, the Moss Beach Distillery restaurant on the coast south of San Francisco. One of the first investigations I did was for Japanese television. We did work with a Japanese medium who was very, very good. And at one point, we actually had physical phenomena we caught on camera. As the medium, Mrs. Gibo, was describing what was going on and telling us the ghost was going to walk over to the back door and open the back door, and the back door opened 5 times, which was great. And then she's sitting down at a table talking to the ghost in one of the dining rooms, and the cameras are rolling, and she is communicating. And this is a question that came up right off the bat, although I knew the answer already. They had asked me in English to ask this question. Mrs. Gibo was talking in Japanese and then saying what the ghost was saying. And the reason for that was because it was for a Japanese TV show. So when I asked Mrs. Gibo on camera, does the ghost understand Japanese? And Mrs. Gibo looked at me like I was an idiot and said, it's all mental. I don't need to say a single word, but then there'd be nothing for the cameras. So language, it's beyond language, basically is what she said. Then she pulls out fashion magazines from her bag and starts flipping through them and turning them around to the empty chair and showing nothing, these pictures of women in different dresses. And I didn't think anything of that. I didn't even bother asking. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the restaurant. One of the witnesses who had seen the ghost many times, she was known as the Blue Lady for decades, wearing blue clothing circa around 1930. She says, I know the face. I saw the ghost and I saw her face, but she's wearing like a little black cocktail dress. What did you do? What happened was Mrs. Gibo gave her fashion advice and told her all she had to do was think of herself wearing different clothing, and she could be wearing different clothing. And since that time, as far as I know, no witness has seen her in the little in anything but more modern clothing.
That's awesome. By the way, I totally stole that from you. I have asked people, picture a spirit, any spirit.
Yeah.
And then afterward I said, do you see them with legs? No. Well, could that explain why a lot of people see spirits, the torso?
Yeah, it's because we think of ourselves in a certain way, and we can only expect that other
Yeah.
humans who are dead are thinking of themselves that way too.
I've stolen that, ladies and gentlemen, from
Nope,
Loyd Auerbach.
that's perfectly okay.
I'm coming clean on that right now because I have to. A couple of things I wanted to hit on real quick. Some of them we can bring on, George, as we get to the end of the at the end of the show. One of the things I wanted to talk about, we mentioned it before, this idea where children have less filter, they have more paranormal experiences. And I wanted to ask you about eyesight, particularly rods and cones,
Uh-huh.
which are in the eye. Now, correct me if I've got them backwards. Rods allow us to see in color, and
I think that
cone in black and white.
I
I
think that's boy, it's been so long since I looked at that.
Yeah, I know. I have it flip-flop, but out there, if there are any optometrists out there, please weigh in. Um, but as we age, they're not as sharp, obviously, as when we're young, and they tend to dull a little bit. And we tend to see black and white in our peripheral and the visible spectrum of light when we're looking straight ahead. So as they deteriorate, I've always wondered if the deterioration of cones result in this corner of the eye shadow phenomena. Because we're
Um,
already seeing in black and white from there, but children, I mean, they're like brand shiny new rods and cones, so maybe they pick up more in the visible light spectrum than we do.
well, I mean, I see in color in my peripheral vision. I don't know about you, but I do see in color in my peripheral vision. In actuality, 1998, there was an article in the Society for Psychical Research. It was a study that was done because by a guy named Vic Tandy it was at a
Oh,
university in UK.
the sword guy there.
Yeah, well, it was basically about the vibration,
Yeah,
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 the
right,
infrasound.
right.
The reason he picked, he came up with that is not because of his own research. That he found a paper from NASA from 1974, and the reference is actually in his article. When they were doing studies of the astronauts and kind of doing their studies biologically of humans for space research, they found that frequency between 18 and 19 hertz actually vibrates the eyeball, the viscous matter of the eyeball,
Right,
and it will cause people to see shadows out of the corner of their eyes.
right.
That can also happen, because it's happened to me, when you're really tired and your eyeball starts shaking. It's pretty rare, but it's happened to me a few times in my life.
Hmm.
And it's like my eyeballs just start going a little, and I won't even drive at that point because it's just too weird. But that does actually cause the shadowy thing at the corner of the eyes. So there may be other things in the environment that do that to us as well. It may be what you say in some circumstances,
There are a ton. There are a
but
ton of things. This is
yeah,
why fluorescent light bulbs
that's the flicker effect. Yeah,
well, it's a flicker, and there's also a hum that
yeah,
comes with them
right.
as well. I've walked into places and gone into a room and put my hand on a ceiling fan, and everybody thinks I'm nuts. But sometimes those things go on the fritz and they don't shut off.
Right.
So you got this ooh kind of thing. So, I'm not saying that that's messing with your limbic part of your brain or anything, but we're just running down the list of possible things.
Well, and sound does affect our brains. Sound
Yeah.
affects our bodies. It can cause anxiety. I mean, it's been used, low frequency sound has been used in movie soundtracks to heighten anxiety.
Oh yeah.
and such. I think the one that I experienced was Prince of Darkness, a John Carpenter film years and years
I
ago.
love that movie. So underrated.
Man, I was watching it at home, and it's like I'm getting really. I don't usually get anxious of horror films, but I'm getting anxious, and then a commercial comes on. It's like, and then the movie comes back on after commercial. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? It's like, they're clearly, and it really turned out that there was a low frequency sound that was coming through as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Very underrated movie. Hey, any movie that Alice Cooper as a minion of Satan, and you're okay.
Right.
Okay.
Anything with Alice Cooper in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine
Yeah.
with me. Um, what did I want to touch on here? I want to get to some questions that we have in chat, of course. Here's something. I had a case, and I want to see if you've had something similar, where we're going back to colonial times in a colonial house. Very prominent family, not only in the state of Rhode Island, but in colonial America. So this guy builds the house, marries a sister. She passes away 6 years later, married a woman. 6 years later, she passed, and the guy married her sister. So apparently, because of turmoil and conflict on the other side between those three, it affected the physical environment of this
Hmm.
house. Pillows were flying off sofas and different things like that. And these people were absolutely freaked out. They handled it very well. But have you ever come into that where some kind of turbulence or some kind of dynamic on the other side affects the physical environment to the point where it's like poltergeist-like activity, but the agent are basically the ghosts?
Um,
It was one of the
ty-
weirdest things, but
Typical. Well, first of all, we have cases of residual stuff, which triggers unconscious psychokinesis from one of the living people.
right.
So, I mean, that's not a true poltergeist case in that it's not the person's stress, but it is something that is triggering that. And that would be where I'd go first before thinking, unless there were experiences of apparitions or spirits there, I would not look at that as a possibility for that. But there are cases with, it's pretty rare actually for ghosts to do physical stuff. It's almost like they have to learn to do it. For the cases where there is physical stuff, it's sometimes been months or years before physical things actually happen. In cases with really good apparitional witnessing, a lot of people experiencing that kind of thing. So in fact, I was just at the place yesterday. There was a case I investigated, multiple times between, I don't know, 1988 or 9 and about 1996, called the Banta Inn out in Tracy, California. I took a medium friend of mine had never been there, so we went out there for lunch. And there was a guy, the former owner, had died at the place of a massive heart attack in '68. And shortly after, he was seen by all the regulars, and people were ignoring that because they were regulars at a bar, But then people coming through the bar area to go to the restaurant in the back were remarking about this guy who would then disappear. And eventually, when the new owners took over in 1982, one of them, this was run mainly by Joan Borland. Her husband, Dave, was an Alameda County Sheriff's deputy, did not believe in ghosts. Joan, on the other hand, knew the guy when she was growing up and actually had seen him. And so Dave actually put together a mug book so that anybody who came in and said they saw this guy and he disappeared, he'd show them the mug book. And inevitably, over time, every single person picked out this guy, Tony Gukin. Every person. Nobody without any equivocation. And then something happened to him. But in all that time when they from the early 80s, physical things were happening at the place. Some of them related to what Tony did, his habits when he was alive and behind the bar. Other times just very playful things that reported. And the first time I was there, which was actually with the TV show Hard Copy, an ashtray on the bar behind the camera, because they were interviewing me with their backs to the bar, popped up into the air, flipped over and smacked down on the bar. The bartender and the owner were at the other end. They started laughing. I started laughing. The director, of course, when I told him what happened, He said, "Can you get him to do it again?" And
Of
as soon as
course.
he said that, a glass of orange juice, which was on the bar behind them, which Joan had put out for me, started sliding down the bar. Not on camera because the camera was pointing in a different direction. And so there was a lot of physical activity. There were even some great stories she told us about how the very, very simple things Tony did, the ghost did, to scare skeptics out of the place, including a couple of guys who were in town. This is a story she told. A couple of guys who were at the bar. They heard the place was haunted. They would say, "Oh, we don't believe in ghosts. You guys are making this up." And they had a beer in front of each of them. They had their change of a 20 in front of each of them. And Joan said a quarter in front of each of them flipped up on its edge.
Oh, wow.
That's it. That's all that happened. And she said they looked at each other, they looked at the quarters, and they ran out of the place.
Oh. The best,
Confronted with two.
they
Yeah.
missed half the show. I would have like, okay, what happens next?
Okay, so since you mentioned that, there were physicists I met who, it's not very far from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which was on our nuclear facilities. And when we were there with sightings, I was there with sightings at one point, and there was this guy started talking to us about what's going on, and he talked about some of the stuff that he'd seen. He brought his son there. I said, "What do you do for a living?" He says, "I work at Lawrence Livermore Lab. I'm a physicist." And he said, "We come here a lot to see the show, because there would be a show sometimes for them when they were there." And I asked him, "Well, what do you think about all this?" He says, "I think I have to rethink physics." And that's the attitude somebody should actually have.
Absolutely. The questions that you have to ask, because that's the essence of science. It's not to just catalog, what we know. It's to ask those questions
Right.
of things that we don't. Because if you don't, then we as humans, you mentioned it before, we're always looking for an explanation. Even if the explanation is there is no explanation,
Right.
henceforth paranormal, we go, well, our work here is done.
And there might be no explanation yet. There's a quote I use from a science fiction writer named Kathleen Sky. I use it for almost all of my courses, multiple times. I'm trying to drive it into people's heads. Her quote is, "There's no such thing as the supernatural. There are only things we don't understand yet."
Fair enough. No qualms with that. No qualms with that at all. Want to bring George back because we have some questions from people in chat. Thank you for those. And if you have any more before we get out of here, we'll star them and put them up there. There was a discussion in chat, Loyd. I just want to get into this because I don't know how much of the surface that we can scratch on this. Autism and the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And while you guys were on, I decided, because I'm not that smart, where I had to get some kind of a background. And this is what I got. This phenomenon is driven by unique neurological factors, sensory processing differences, and personal coping mechanisms, rather than literal supernatural abilities. Now, I don't know what they mean by I don't think anybody is claiming supernatural abilities. I think although maybe that's a gray area, but the idea, we talked about perception again. Maybe you can kind of, enlighten us a little bit, because a few people were in chat, so maybe we can hit that real quick if you have some thoughts.
Yeah, so number of years ago, I'm trying to remember how many years ago she started. Diane Powell started doing research with, she's a neuropsychiatrist, and started doing research with some autistic kids who apparently were picking up stuff from the people who were working with them. And she set up some initial experiments and then eventually more controlled experiments. There's a lot of controlled experiments going on these days that seem to indicate that autistic individuals can pick up information that they could not possibly have known from other people, basically telepathy, by definition. And there's a lot there's a podcast called the Telepathy Tapes that dealt with this the first season, although Diane mentioned in an e-group that I'm in that there's a lot of stuff that they left out and they kind of changed some things too. So really it's her research and the research of others on this that really needs to be looked at rather than the pop culture stuff.
Right.
But there seems to be an indication that they can even communicate, some can even communicate with each other in some way. And in fact, I just saw an article, I have to dig it up again. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. There's something that popped up about a study that was just published that there seems to be two, large groups or just main groups of types of activity for autistics. And they're not the same. One is too much information being processed too fast. Another is an overwhelm of information in some respects, if I remember that correctly. But what this article was saying is, and the study was saying, is that we've been approaching autism all wrong and probably treating some autistics differently or wrongly because they're not the same as the other autistics that's out there. So it is a brain issue, a neurological issue. But this research is showing that there is some, and we don't call it paranormal, although that's a good term for things on the side of normal. But it is a form of ESP, a form of psi, what we call psi, that seems to be happening with them.
Now, what was important about that is that one of our listeners is openly, very openly, on the spectrum, and there were two other people who had grandchildren
Yeah.
who were on the spectrum who were doing that. So that's why we brought it up, and, Loyd, thank you so much for that, because they were discussing amongst themselves. So it's good to hear that there is work out there if they want to pursue it. Diane
Right.
Powell. So, George, I figured if you want to get to some of our viewer questions, like I said, we've got a little bit of time. If you have any more or follow-ups, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one comes in from our good friend Mary Beth Reimer. And it is, has anyone ever studied the psychic abilities of twins?
Yes. There's even a book called Twin Telepathy by Guy Lyon Playfair.
I know Guy Lyon. We've had him on the show.
Yeah, and other people have done work in that area as well.
Enfield Poltergeist, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very good book. It was a good study that he did.
A couple from our friend Jeff Hilton. Jeff wants to know, how do you approach explaining to a non-believer that they have had a paranormal experience when it happens during an investigation?
I think it depends on the non-believer and how well I know that person, honestly. Frankly, if they're a true disbeliever, they're not gonna accept it. You may even have to say that they're wrong in their perceptions or something. Sometimes I've dealt with a couple of people who are disbelievers going into an investigation, and they were freaked out by the experience they had, and they immediately started coming up with all sorts of other explanations for it because they couldn't possibly accept that it was something paranormal. And all you can do is say, that fits in with what we know about these experiences. It's a similar experience to others, but I don't know you're going to convince anybody for that.
I don't know if that's our job anymore. I mean, this is just the cynic in me. Like I said, I gave up on that. Peer review, and I've put some things on that I won't, go into this particular story because it's personal to someone in our group. But immediately, people just assail it, and at that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm done with that. I mean, I will ask if I encounter someone, I will ask, are you willing to look at a research report, a controlled laboratory experiment showing ESP exists, or some of the research into the Stargate program? And usually I say, why would I, the response is, why would I spend my time doing that? It's like, why am I spending my time talking to you at that point? Okay. If they're not willing to look at the data, there's no point. Right.
But there are those moments, however, that they do have that experience and it changes them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. if you can get them past their freaking out about that experience,
Right.
then yes, it might engage their curiosity. That's what you want to happen. That it's going to engage their curiosity. And perhaps all you need to do once you hear what their experience is tell them, a lot of people have these experiences. They're considered pretty normal. Do you want to see anything about other people's experiences?
It's the paranormal version of Red Rover. You're on our side now that you're experienced. Another question from Jeff Hilton here also. There used to be an old argument. How do you know that we aren't a cow dreaming of being a human? And when we sleep, the cow is awake. Hey, prove
Yeah,
it.
it was actually, I think it was not a
Jeff,
cow,
like us, grew up in the '70s. So
yeah, I think it was a butterfly, not a cow,
okay,
actually.
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to one of the best episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, called "The Measure of a Man," in which Data was going to be taken apart, and he resented that, and
Yes.
there ended up being a little court case with
Yep.
Judge Advocate General, and it ultimately ended up with Picard saying, "Prove to me, prove that I'm not sentient. Forget about Data. Prove that I'm not."
Yeah.
And that's really, doesn't work.
No, by no means. And that's the crux of it. When I wanted to get into AI a little bit, and I've got one more
Okay.
question to pose first, but it's about the abilities of making a robot to transfer consciousness into. So I want to get back to that.
It wasn't really a question by Jeff, but I started just because it was really cool.
Uh,
That's all.
All right, and finally, from Joseph Freza, Joseph wants to know: can a ghost or spirit appear perfectly fine to one person and to another appear with the injuries that caused their death?
I I have not heard of any instance like that. There are plenty of cases in our record where not everybody sees the ghost, but two people do, and maybe somebody else hears the voice. So perceptions are different. And a couple of cases I read from, I want to say the 1930s, years ago, and also discussing this with a colleague of mine, that there was a group in a haunted place, and there was an apparition there, and three or four of them saw the ghost, but they were in different parts of the room, and every one of them saw the ghost facing them.
Huh.
So the ghost was in the same location, but depending on where you were, the ghost was facing them, and that makes sense in our model. If it's a projection of how they look, they're sending it out to everybody.
There you go.
So if my thought of myself is face on, and I project that to people even facing a different direction, they're going to see me face on. So the only way that I can think of, it's possible certainly that, maybe the apparition he's talking about appeared the way that they think of themselves, and to another person, because they wanted to get across, here's how I died, they think of themselves to that person, project that image. I mean, that's something we don't know enough about yet.
Let me ask you about equipment real quick. Why do you think ghost hunting equipment has become so central to this modern paranormal culture we're in? Is it just that we live in an age of technology? So of course it's going to come into this field too. But despite so many questions about the validity of it, I mean, are we just marketing things? Are we just trying out different things? Is it a combination of all of that? And I guess I'll give you my follow-up right away. Do we just over-rely too much on it?
Well, first, it comes from TV, from the paranormal TV shows that decided, because TV is a visual medium, we need something that lights up and makes noise. That was important, number one. In the 80s, after Ghostbusters especially, I was constantly asked, and my colleagues were asked, if we're doing an investigation on TV for unsolved mysteries, something like it, do you have something that makes noise, that lights up? At which point I'd often, if the director was insistent, I would pull out of my gear my toy tricorder from Star Trek and turn that on. The director would almost inevitably not be a Star Trek fan, but the cameraman would be. So I still carry it with me, by the way. and I now have a real tricorder from the original series that has video and stuff. So uh, the the other thing is that there has been a bit of technology. We rely on it in many different ways. I mean, most people have no clue about how a microwave oven works, but if someone is using a magnetometer, an EMF meter, and they claim that they're doing it scientifically and they don't analyze the data that comes from that thing, and they say it's scientific, they are basically saying that using a microwave oven and not knowing how it works makes you scientific as well. So there's a couple things. The technology was used because you need to show something happening on TV. And when it really comes down to it, if the ghost is not cooperative or nothing, we're not picking up anything personally in the environment for a haunting, then it relies on the ghost story. And that's not what those shows wanted. They wanted to show that anybody could do these investigations, including plumbers, and they had to have some device in their hands. And we were using environmental sensors, but not the way they were using environmental sensors. So they're used in different ways. And then comes the marketing, because there have been a lot of people who saw a buck to be made here.
Sure.
Very clearly, we've seen that with devices that technically cost about $20 to build and cost $180 to sell. That's a hell of a markup. The cat balls, those little balls that make lights, when those were sold for a while as ghost detecting things, and that was a markup of something like 400%. There are people who come up with devices that they are unwilling to even let someone with a non-disclosure find out how they work to see if they're actually doing anything, but they're selling them because they're doing some things. And then there are the things like the apps. I still occasionally hear from people on about the old Ghost Radar app. We used to get calls from people saying my house is haunted. It's like, what's going on? It's like, well, the Ghost Radar app is telling me there's a ghost in my house.
Well then.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, listen, I've been sent pictures where they used a ghost app that inserts
I
a
have
ghost
many.
into a photo totally innocently. They weren't even trying to be deceptive,
Right.
but
Right.
they just used it as prescribed, pointed over here, and it's like, oh my God, a little Japanese girl like from The Ring. or
Yeah,
something
it
like
used to
that.
be the case that I would get those photos, and because I still have like 5 or 6 of those on my phone. I would recognize the character that shows up, the ghost that shows up, and so I would take a selfie of myself with the same ghost and send it back to them and say, where did you get this picture? And they usually tell me that a friend took a picture of them, and the ghost was in the picture, and it's like their friend is pranking them.
Yeah,
They took it.
you've been kind of had by you. You
Yeah,
need to have a chat with them.
yeah,
I mean, the technology is, I don't know, I think in some ways it's made everybody a little lazy because, we want it and we want it now. And I don't know. I understand, rehashing and reviewing hours and hours of
yeah.
video or audio. It's tedious. It sucks. I don't
Well,
like it, but
I often get asked if I, want to get an EVP. We don't do EVP. That's not, unless the people we're dealing with. In fact, I rarely do public places. I've mostly in my life we've worked with people who have phenomena going on in their homes, because the public places, there's other issues that are involved there. Although it's a lot easier to find witnesses in the public locations. Very often, you just don't know
right.
how much of it is made up. But one of the reasons we don't do EVP is because I have better communication. I work with psychics and mediums who are really good, and they can tell me what the ghost is saying. I don't need an audio recording that is dependent on the apparition, the ghost, affecting, using mind over matter on the device, because it's not acoustical, or it's coming from the operator. And I've talked to people in ghost hunting groups over the years who've told me, yeah, Bill in our group always gets EVP wherever we go. It's Bill. It's not a ghost. It's Bill. Bill is doing it. He doesn't realize he's doing it, but Bill's doing it. I mean, he might have a ghost that's following him around and like hanging on to him, so he's to give him EVP everywhere. But yeah,
Yeah.
that just
Well,
doesn't happen.
I want to meet Bill.
Yeah, I want to, I've talked to the Bills of the world, and they're like sometimes they wonder if they're causing it themselves. the
Yeah.
smart ones.
Well, I mean, like I said, delivery system, social media, it's affected the way people interpret, view, approach this whole thing. And I think that we do the best we can is separating both, like, okay, this
Yeah.
is more theatrical, it's more entertaining. And there are some that are very good. And there are others that clearly, like I said, these are the people that this is our 35th hundred investigation, and we're still jumping around like as soon as something makes a thud. So clearly,
Yeah.
a lot of it is just it's performative, and
Right.
you can have it, whatever.
And the technology can be good as long as it's a decent piece of technology. It's just that number one, you need to know everything it can do and can't do. You need to know every false positive, what it normally does, because these things can't be designed to pick up ghosts. We don't have enough information to do that. So you have to do that. And then you want to use them in concert. In other words, if all the equipment goes off in a location and you have various types of equipment at the same time,
Right.
yeah, something's happening. Especially if somebody who's present is sensing a presence or something. So if you can connect it to the human experience, but then you have different types of equipment that's all at the same time in the same location reacting to something, then it's either totally environmental. We did have a case years ago where that happened, and the medium was speaking with the little girl's ghost, and we're getting stuff on thermal vision. This is back in the early 90s. And when I took all that data and showed the footage I was connected to an environmental scientist because we're using environmental sensors. EMF meters are environmental sensors and that stuff.
Right.
We had the Geiger counter go off too, and he said, "Oh, I know what could do that." I said, "What?" "A nuclear explosion could do that." But since you're still here, couldn't have been that.
Right.
So
We're not
he had no clue.
vaporized at this point.
Yeah, there was nothing he thought he could think of. And I've talked to others about this, that if different environmental sensors show something, then either there's a lot of different environmental things going on that may be going on all the time, or there's probably something that is affecting the environment. It's not detecting the ghost, it's detecting the changes the ghost might be making in the environment.
Right. Right, exactly. Something has affected the environment at this point. Now let's endeavor to figure out what it is, and
That's
that's
where you need people. You need human
yeah.
detector, human sensors.
Right, exactly.
That's where Lloyd Auerbach comes into play.
That's right.
Lloyd, these 2 hours fly by again. We could ask you a million more questions, but we just have to schedule to have you come back and join us again. There's a lot of things to really think about with our discussions tonight. What's going on with you for the summer, my friend?
So I'll be teaching a course, possibly two courses for the Rhine Education Center. That's just go to rhine.org, click on education. Our new courses will be coming up. They're just going to be 4-week classes in August.
Online.
So, online. Anybody can take them from anywhere in the world. You can watch the recordings or attend live. We have a live discussion, but there's a lot of extra information that comes through. I am teaching a course, which is kind of appropriate here, called Presenting the Paranormal to the Public. And it's about how to talk to people credibly, so in a way that makes you, so that they don't think you're crazy. That's number one. What's the language? How do you talk about this? What do you need to talk about? I talk about public speaking. I talk about writing and publishing, and then kind of pulling it all together in general. So it's a more practical course that I've taught a few times before. In fact, I'm going to be working it up as a book later this year as well. There'll be other classes that are offered by John Kruth, who's our executive director. And then this fall, I'll be teaching some other classes. But the classes will be listed by July 1st for August. And then our next session will start at the beginning of October, which means September 1st is when those courses will be up and running. There are all sorts of parapsychology classes. I teach field investigation work, working with equipment, working with psychics. All that stuff is part of what I teach. And then John teaches some more research-oriented classes. And we have others as well.
I strongly endorse it because I know a number of people who are currently or have taken Lloyd's courses. So I
Thank you.
strongly urge you, if you want to pursue this, and this is something that you think you're interested in to get into the human condition, among other things, then please, by all means, just go take the course. You'll absolutely love it because you've got some great Yelp reviews, Loyd, from the people I know that
That's good. That's
have
great.
taken it. They just talk at length about it.
Glad to
So
hear that. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll also mention people can go to my website, which is just LloydAuerbach.com, and any announcements will be
LloydAuerbach.com.
made. I'll have announcements of those
Yeah,
things.
we'll put it up one more time. LloydAuerbach.com. Pretty much straightforward.
It's as always, it's been a great pleasure, and I'm sure my brain will hurt for the rest of the evening. But we
That's my
we lo
job.
we love
It
having you
sounds like a
on.
you problem to me.
Yeah. And we'll get in touch with you again here soon enough. Have you come back and join
Love
us?
it.
Always interesting, Loyd. Thank you so much. Hang with us tight for a second as we wrap up here.
Okay.
For everyone else in the chat, thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who are our Patreon members, tomorrow night, Town Hall, 8 p.m. as usual. For those of you who are not a Patreon members, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, why not?
Patreon.com/Dead Air Paranormal. $3 membership. It's the best deal out there for all the stuff that you have available to you. So make sure you check it out. Until next week, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. This has been Dead Air Live on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel. Have a great night.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad, oh baby's hella bad. After her there ain't no coming back. Wanna take a run at that. I think she's feeling me, turn it up a few degrees. My imagination of her body gets the best of me. Oh gosh, she's such a tease, bitten lips, bruised knees.